I can see myself being in Milwaukee Bucks for the rest of my career. But the moment I feel like people are not committed as I am to get that golden thing in the back, I am not. I'm a Milwaukee Buck, but most importantly, I'm a winner. I want to win, and I have to do whatever it takes for me to win. And if there's a better situation for me to win the Larry O'Brien, I have to take that better situation.
You know, believe it or not, I actually saw this coming. I had a video planned for this channel about this specific topic, but then Giannis went and decided to give me a quote talking directly about what I thought he might be thinking to begin with, which is the Bucks might not be it in the near future, and it seems like he is aware of that possibility as proven by the clip. So let's talk about why that is the case. Real quick before I get into this video, if you end up enjoying it, please be sure to subscribe to the channel. Also drop a like. It only takes 1 second and it makes a massive difference in how the video performs in the YouTube algorithm, so it is very much appreciated. Also, real quick plug, my gaming channel, I am doing a Spurs My NBA series, a realistic rebuild in the same vein as like in a Funky Diabetic My GM series from the past, in the same spirit. So if that's the type of content that you would enjoy, liking seeing a team being built from the ground up in a realistic manner, I would appreciate it if you checked that out. Episode 3 is coming out tomorrow. So why would Giannis maybe feel a little bit apprehensive about the future of Milwaukee? Well, it's pretty simple. It's hard to have a future when all of your core players around you are going to be just too damn old. Brook Lopez is going to be 35, I believe it is, going into next season, and Chris Middleton's going to be 33. Jrue Holiday is going to be 32. Now, don't get me wrong, at least in the case of Jrue and Chris, this is not like old as dirt, but it is old enough that it's like, okay, I'm not sure that you're going to have star level production, let's say 3 years down the line. And in fact, I think that's the timeline that I kind of want to operate on here with Giannis. In roughly 3 years, what do we think the Milwaukee Bucks core is going to look like? Also, in the case of Chris Middleton, I think there's a real chance that his career has been shortened by just the injuries that he has dealt with. He spent a lot of this previous season recovering, and I'm just not sure if he's necessarily going to be the Chris Middleton that we have always known. And even if he is for the short term, I'm not so confident he will be in the long term. In the case of Brook Lopez, you're 35 years old. I wouldn't say he's like aging out or like age is catching up to him in the sense that like, you know, it's any kind of criticism, I guess. I don't like people take that as criticism when it's often just an abject reality, because as we all know, Father Time is undefeated. LeBron is making a strong case for being the only one to beat it, but even he will succumb to it eventually. And it's safe to say that Brook Lopez is not going to be the one to beat it, in spite of the fact that he arguably had like his second best season maybe last year, maybe even his best depending on your perspective. Obviously he wasn't an all-star last year and he was before, but maybe you like his play style now more than then. Either way, if he was not that good and really just not a key rotation guy, even by next year, but especially 3 years from now, that would be more than reasonable and more than expected, if anything. So that's one of your core pillars that's not going to be here for long. Chris Middleton, injuries I think are going to shorten his career and lessen his impact. And for Jrue Holiday, while he is the youngest out of those guys, he is also terrible in the playoffs and has been every time, at least in terms of scoring the ball. He still manages to get a good amount of assists because he's a good playmaker and he's a very good defender. Obviously, one of the best perimeter defenders of all time, one of the best guard defenders of all time. But in terms of actually bringing the shot creation and that and having reliable scoring ability, that just disappears regularly. And that's not even because he's old, but 3 years from now, he will be old. And I can't imagine the age is going to improve his consistency. So I imagine Giannis is looking at these circumstances around him and saying, while while yes, I love Milwaukee and I have a lot of loyalty to Milwaukee, I have more loyalty towards winning. And if the environment around me is not good enough to actually win, well, then I have to do what's best for me and best for winning. So, given that I do think this is on like just roughly a 3-year timeline, obviously this doesn't mean that now's the time to hit like a panic button, but I do think it's time to hit the pretty concerned button, I guess. You know, not a panic attack, but there's an issue here that we need to address, which is I don't know that this roster is good enough to compete as it is right now with the top dogs in the league, and I certainly don't think it will be good enough to compete 3 years down the line if there are no major changes made to this roster. Because as of right now, even as they currently exist, I'm not all that confident in them beating a team like the Denver Nuggets, for example, as Denver has essentially become the new threshold and marker for, are you good enough to beat Denver? Then you can win a championship. If you're not good enough to beat Denver, it's questionable, unless you get a break with Denver just not ending up going to the finals, more likely than not because of an injury, then that's fair enough. But after that, you need to improve the roster and save for like a improvement or a big leap from like Bobby Portis and, you know, I don't know, maybe Malik Beasley goes back to like the 20 point per game guy that he was in Minnesota very briefly. Outside of those like outlier options, it's pretty unlikely that they're really going to get some big boost in talent really anywhere, because if you look at the assets this team has, pretty much just their own draft picks going forward, and I think there's a chance a few of those are going to other places even. You're probably not getting a lot of value out of trading any of the three of Drew, Middleton, or Brook. So you're really gonna need a rather hyper-specific circumstance, maybe a like star level player specifically demands to go to Milwaukee. But other than that, you're just kind of stuck with what you have, and if what you have is not good enough now, it especially isn't going to be when all of those players are, you know, getting close to being over the hill. Now, Giannis isn't necessarily significantly younger than these guys. He's 6 years younger than Brook, I think like 4 or 5 than Middleton, and 3 years younger than Drew. But I also think he has the potential to have just way more longevity than those guys do, especially Chris and Brook. Not that Brook didn't have longevity because he already is 35, but you know, longevity going forward, how many years more can these guys bring to the table? I think Giannis could still be a superstar level player at the age of 37. I'm not so confident that Brook Lopez will still be a good player at the age of 43. Not so confident that Chris Middleton would still be a good player at the age of 41. So Giannis is thinking about his future, and the Bucks need to think about his future if they want to actually keep him in Milwaukee, because a short-term perspective on how you're building this team, it just ain't going to cut it. You need to look at the long term here, because if you want him to be there long term, he needs to have the help there long term in order to compete for championships long term. The way that I would put it is this: I'm really not all that confident that the Milwaukee Bucks will win a title over the next 3 years, and I am extremely confident that if the roster does not change in any meaningful manner, they especially will not be winning championships with that core after those 3 years have passed and we're officially seeing those guys get over the hill. So this doesn't mean you hit the panic button, but it does mean you as a front office need to start to at least attempt to do something about this. You can't just sit on your thumbs and just hope for the best. They need to be kind of aggressive in terms of what they're doing. Now, I don't necessarily know what that looks like because, as I mentioned, they don't really have a ton of assets, but they can't just afford to sit there and do nothing. Is sit there on your thumbs even a thing? I think it's sit on your hands, but I don't know. I guess that's the dirtier version. Whatever. Either way, my point, the Milwaukee Bucks have a questionable future going forward, and I would not be surprised at all if Giannis was very much entertaining the notion of going somewhere else after the next few seasons have passed. And like, yeah, 3 years isn't right around the corner, but it's not that far from it. And I do have my concerns about their ability going forward to actually put that team around him. As of right now, I would predict the Nuggets and the Celtics to be better than the Bucks, and potentially even more teams than that. So yeah. The other thing is, like, their offense has always been wonky, and even now it currently exists that way, even when they did win a championship. championship, it was in that manner. And then the fact that the landscape of the league, I think, is just more impressive and there is more competition than when the Bucks won their title in 2021. So for that reason, I feel like the window is really starting to close and not a lot of people are acknowledging it or being concerned by it. And at least I am. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on, not anything really hot to pay attention to right now, but you know, there might be smoke and that leads to fire. With that said, again, go check out that Spurs series. I would really appreciate it. I can't emphasize enough how much I enjoy doing that series in particular. And you guys, the people who actually watch it, are like super into it, it seems. So if it's the type of content that would interest you, I'd appreciate it if you checked it out. And yeah, that's it. Shout out to Rudy for editing this video, and goodbye.